Hello, and welcome to episode 11 of the Let Me Think podcast. And we have Eric Lingen here, who is with the Spirit World Center located in Kingston, Ontario, in Canada. And he is going to talk to me today about shamanism. I'm so excited. Eric, tell the listeners about yourself and what you do.
Well, thanks so much for having me on the show, Emily. This is fantastic. And yes, what we do at the center is basically teach people how to get in touch with the spirits and in touch with their spirit guides, especially. And so we teach that through a number of different modalities. One of them being visionary mediumship. And of course, and we'll talk more about that today and how it interrelates with shamanism. And then, of course, we also teach, how to get in touch with spirits and your spirit guides through intuition, and also sacred ceremony, and a number of other different modalities there, because we believe that, for every person, everyone's different, right? So we find the approach that works for you. You might be very right brain or left brain, and if you're, I always get these mixed up, but if you're right brain and
Me too.
intuitive, if you're right brain and intuitive, then
Yes.
you might love visionary mediumship, because you can go into that inner space, into that trance, and just let go and connect with things. But if you're very left brain, like me, for instance, then you might enjoy, let's say, sacred ceremony, where you connect with the spirits in that, you create a space and you connect with just feeling their presence, but then, speaking out loud and just working
Like
with them
working
in
with
that
you.
in that kind of overt physical manner.
You're right,
And
like
so
tangibly, yeah,
exactly. So there's
yeah.
many different ways of interacting, and so we try to cater to everyone's needs at the center. So yeah, that's what we do.
That's wonderful, and, how do you define shamanism? Some people listening may not be familiar at all with what that is, and, you mentioned visionary mediumship, which is what you teach. How do those 2 interrelate?
Right. It's a very good question. And yeah, shamanism, it's actually a tough term to define, or it can be a very simple term. And the reason for this is it's coming from, anthropologists were operating in Siberia back in the 1800s, and they were coming across uh, a spiritual tradition there in which people were entering into trance and communing with the spirits, communing with the spirit world on behalf of the village, and of people who in the community needed healing and help. And of course, so they took the Tungusian word that is similar to shaman, and they started applying that to all other traditions in the world that seem to have similar things going on, right?
Mhm.
And unfortunately, it has been applied to traditions that are very disparate, that are very different from each other, right? So if you compare Tungusian shamanism, which is very much the drum entering into trance and this type of thing, compare it to, let's say, Peruvian shamanism, where it's based on use of ayahuasca and a base of hallucinogenics, right? There are wide differences in how it's performed, and how that function is performed. And but ultimately, at its core, there is this thing. It's the trance, entering into trance. And so whether you're listening to drumming, or you are taking a essentially a poison that is going to cause so much pain in your system that you're going to dissociate, or the Peruvian version, which is ayahuasca, and so entering into that hallucinogenic state where you enter into that trance state, the core similarity is entering into that trance and
Mhm.
then having access to the spirit world. Now, one thing that I have found in my studies, and that we really focus on at the Spirit World Center, is this thing called visionary mediumship. And in many ways, you can look at shamanism and that use of trance, right, is not unique to those certain indigenous societies where we find shamanism. You can find it throughout time and space. And so we find that use of trance, entering into that other realm of spirits. We find that well, everywhere. And some examples are, let's say, the astral travels of Christian mystics, right, where they enter
Yeah.
into a trance space either through frenzied prayer or other techniques, and they go on a mystical journey and meet with angels and such. You also have the work of Emanuel Swedenborg, where he's doing something similar. Uh,
Hmm.
and then you have historical European
Hmm.
witches who there's a lot of evidence that what they were doing was applying. That there was basically a wise woman cult, right, within historical Europe, where they were applying what's called a flying ointment, where it was these hallucinogenic herbs that they were applying to their skin, absorbing through the skin and sending them on a really
Hmm.
powerful trance journey.
Yeah.
You also have
Like the
visionary mediumship traditions within Kabbalistic traditions, path
right.
working the tree of life, and something more recent as well. You have users of certain hallucinogenics like DMT who go on journeys and meet with
Hmm.
spiritual beings, right? So we're having these particular, it's this universal human experience
Hmm.
that we are encountering really everywhere, because you're finding that if you enter into an alternate state of consciousness through any method, that opens you up to the spirits. Two other
Hmm.
examples that I've come across, especially doing interviews lately. One is Reiki. That a lot of people, when they are performing Reiki, are opening themselves up to contact with spirits, because it's almost like they're
Yes.
going into an altered state of trance while performing Reiki.
Hmm.
And then, of course, you have lots of people who are just doing mindfulness meditation or mantra meditation, who, because they are in that receptive state, they're able to hear messages from their guides or
Yes.
otherwise have actually visionary activity happening.
Yes.
And what we
And
mean by,
yeah.
go ahead, sorry.
Well, I was gonna say I teach that style of meditation, mantra meditation, and I just love hearing from my students what they experience because it's just all like it's always different, it's always unique, and I've had it too. I was also gonna add, I recently was interested in reading about the oracles of Delphi, and they in ancient Greece who they discovered were just sitting above a sulfur spring or something. But that was
Inhaling those
real. They
fumes.
really, yeah, and they really went into a trance. And then, the yogis of ancient India all doing the same kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's something that is universal. And I would say that's the birthright of humanity. It's something that naturally comes to us, because ultimately it's not even just humans that are able to enter into trance and connect with the spirit world. Well, I don't know about connecting with the spirit world, but you can put a chicken into trance. You basically, it's quite simple. All you have to do is
Yeah.
take the chicken and then you put its beak down on the ground. You take a piece of chalk
Hypnotize it.
and you
Oh,
draw a line
a line.
slowly away
I've heard of
from
this.
the chicken,
Yeah.
and it will stay there for like half an hour. They actually have competitions on how long you can
Yeah,
hypnotize a
I'm
chicken for.
sure.
So altered states is not just for humans. Pretty much a lot of
Yeah.
different beings can go into that
Yeah.
state. And to explain what's happening there, I always go back to something that Aldous Huxley said in the original, like, countercultural book, The Doors of Perception, where he basically is talking about what hallucinogenics do.
Hmm.
And he is looking at the brain, and he posits that the brain is not there to show you reality. It's actually a filter, that there's so much information out there,
Yes.
and the brain takes that and filters it down to what it's going to show you, because it only needs to show you things that are useful for decision making, for survival. And so if
Yes.
you're thinking that we're back to being one of our earliest ancestors, walking through a jungle, let's say, or through the plains or the savannas, well, you don't really care about a lot of things. You care about not getting
Yeah.
eaten. And
Right.
so if you're and so ultimately, when you're, let's say, walking through a jungle, there's so much information, right? There's every single vine, every single leaf, every single change in texture, every single distinction of color. And so if you were aware of all of that, you'd be completely sensory overloaded. So the
Yes.
key is that you're only going to be aware of what could potentially eat
What is
you
useful? Yeah.
and what you can eat, right? And so that'll keep you alive and also,
Yeah.
get you some nice food. And
Yeah.
so ultimately then what the brain is doing is filtering out all that unnecessary stuff. Well,
Mhm.
ultimately spirits and that type of thing are the unnecessary stuff.
True.
And
Yeah. Well,
I've actually had a talk with a medium before where they were driving and they had a spirit come through and wanted to talk to them, and they had a really full the vision of it,
like
and
in
they
front of the
almost
car or in the back
um
seat.
I think it was a loud voice and also kind of a visual thing that
Why
they were
does that
getting,
always
but
happen when people are driving? It's so
uh,
rude.
I
Can they
think
just
it's
wait till you park or
I
something?
think it's because there's also driving trance, right, where they or
I know. I'm
truckers
just kidding.
trance
That's
where they
true. That's so
but
true. I'm
yeah,
just
oh, go
joking.
ahead. But she almost crashed her car when this happened,
Right.
right?
That's
And
what I'm
so it
saying. Why
shows
are
you,
they? Yeah.
yeah, basically if you're seeing spirits throughout your waking hours,
It
like, so let's say when
distracts
you're
you
out hunting
from,
or something, it
yeah,
distracts you from
you're gonna get
surviving.
eaten. You're
And
gonna crash. Yeah.
so ultimately the brain has evolved to factor these things out. So what
Yeah.
happens when you go into trance, and whether it's through the use of hallucinogenics or whether it's dancing around a fire for a week until you are so exhausted that you just completely collapse, or you
Or you're
listen to
driving a
drumming.
cross country
Yeah.
18 wheeler. No,
Yeah,
keep going.
or the safest, of
Yeah.
course, is listening to drumming, where you entrain
Okay.
your brain. It's about 210 beats per minute. They call that the
Oh.
Yucatan beats, because they found that there was a church down in the Yucatan where they were finding that the parishioners were going into these weird trance-like states during these services.
Just from listening to from being exposed to it. That's
Yeah,
so
and
wild.
what they found was that people with the parishioners there were beating gourds at 210 beats per minute during the services, and that was
Hmm.
putting them into this trance state where they were having these spiritual experiences and stuff.
So do you
So
think that I could like listen to a recording of 210 beats a minute and have the same effect?
absolutely, absolutely, listen to a drum track. It really doesn't matter whether you're doing it yourself or listening to it. It's
Hmm.
your brain just in training with that. And then of course it's good to have an intention with that, right? It's not good to
Yes.
just listen to
No.
that and then you go into this trance subjective state, and then it's like, well,
Like
if you don't have an
what do I
intention,
do now?
literally
Yeah,
anything can happen, right?
anything could happen. Yeah, I was just like I guess it was last night. I was lying down listening to music and I just kind of I don't know if I would call it a trance like state. What I mean, I think there's different levels of it personally. But for me last night it was like I went into this kind of place where I was just kind of like I don't know, flying or floating through space. And I kind of said in my head to whatever was there listening, my spirit guides or whoever was there with me, like, what is this? What is this? I think I said, is this what it's like on the other side? And I heard sometimes, and it's sometimes like that, and it's sometimes like something else. It's whatever there's no like one thing that it's like. It's just I don't know. This I don't even know if this is
I,
relevant to what you
you
were
know
saying,
what?
but it's like my perception of reality makes even that be what it is, and it also makes this reality what it is.
you know something I love that, because something that, see, the getting into the trance is the first part, right? And then your mind is open to that subjective state, and now you can see things and connect with things that earlier were filtered out. And so something that I find then is that we have the spirit world, right? We have this realm of pure consciousness from which we come, and which is which we're connecting with. And ultimately it is infinite and incomprehensible to our
Yes.
chimpanzee minds.
Right.
and
Yes.
and so I very much find that when a consciousness reaches out to you from the spirit world, that it's not, when you're going on, say, visionary journeys and such, it's useful to not take everything literal as like, oh, I was
Right.
in that cave, or I was,
Right.
because they're creating an experience for you, and they're looking into you during a visionary journey, where you're in trance. Let's say you're just listening to headphones and you're listening to a drum track, and you're experiencing this vision, inner vision meditation, right? When you are experiencing that, they look into you, and they look at, let's say, your cultural vocabulary. They look at your spiritual lexicon. What do things mean to you? What does a robin mean to you, right? and they give you an experience that's catered to you,
Yeah.
that is really personal to you and that has meaning. And so you don't look at the, something, the literal parts, or something reached out to you, and then there was a message conveyed to you, right? And
Yeah.
then the metaphorical part that's not to be taken literal is actually the individual things that happened in that
Yes.
journey, right? And yeah, so I find that the spirit world can appear in many different ways to different people,
Mm-hmm.
uh, based on where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And also it can vary, even based on where you are in your life, right? What you believe, what you have
Mm-hmm.
been exposed to. So yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
really is malleable, in a way similar to what you're saying. Absolutely.
Yeah. 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 That's fascinating. So I have a question. How did you get into all of this work?
So
Tell
this is
us
a
a
big
story.
question. Yeah, it's a big question. I kind of alluded to this before the interview. It might take a little while to
I'm
explain. So,
excited.
so
Yeah.
myself, I've been involved in spirituality for a long, long time. I visited England when I was 12 years old. And on the last day, we toured Stonehenge and Avebury Circle and Glastonbury Tor. I just became absolutely fascinated by that ancient spirituality, and I had to find out more. So when I got back to Canada, I became the kid who's going to the new age section of the bookstore every day, right? Back
Right.
when we had awesome, brick and mortar bookstores. And I just, I became fascinated with things like druidry, and then that brought me to Celtic shamanism, right? And then that brought me to just shamanism itself. And so in my early and late teens, I was just experimenting with everything from Wicca to paganism to shamanism to ascension stuff and other new age topics, right? And then I kind of left that when I was when I went off to university. I got an interest
Mm-hmm.
in other things, right? And but I came back to it in my mid-20s, where I had a real, my career in the city was not what I was expected, what I wanted, and I felt this deep soul level desire to do something meaningful, right? So
Like
I left
everything you
that.
have said until now, I swear I could have told this exact same story minus the Stonehenge. Like it's
Wow,
so funny.
it's
I think a lot of our
it's a con-
listeners really relate to everything you're saying. So anyway, go on. I'm sorry.
absolutely, it's this perennial cycle that happens in people, right? It's something you're that fascinates you for a long time, and then at some point it's something that you just decide to dive into, right?
Hmm.
And so I left Toronto. I basically became a hermit and just entered into my studies, right? And I was basically exploring nature spirituality and all this. And eventually, you might find that when you do that, it's sometimes tough to find a partner who understands you. And so thankfully online dating worked for me, and I met my partner Lauva. And I was in Kingston, she was in Ottawa. It's about a 2-hour drive or
Uh-huh.
so.
Wait,
And
stop
so
right. Hold on
go
one
ahead.
second. Also, our listeners would very much like to know how you found someone else spiritual on a dating, like what dating app were you using and what filters were you using?
It
Please
was
help
plenty of
us.
fish. It was plenty of fish.
Just plenty of fish. Okay. Write that
Yeah,
down, everybody.
which is like
Very
the
important.
most basic free dating app that you can have. Right?
But like but the universe brought you together, like it was no accident, right?
That's right.
So
Yeah.
it's not like if I go on Plenty of Fish I'll have better chances finding a spiritual man than I have on another app. It's like the
It's
universe brings you what you need. Yeah.
exactly. And I had a profile that was all about my interests in these kind of spiritual topics, and
Love that.
I found her profile like within an hour of her uploading it apparently. And I was just like, hi, because
Oh
she just,
wow.
she was into all the similar but slightly different spiritual things, right? So it was like, yeah,
Mhm.
this is great, and so yeah, we got together, and within but it was really weird, something that happened within a month of us starting to date. And that was that we had a possession event. So uh and this is something that can happen when you are highly intuitive, and sometimes highly open, and can enter into a trance state
Yeah.
very easy. It's something to watch for, actually. So uh, Lauva, she is at the time she was working as a professional visual artist, and she enters into trance very, very easily. She's incredibly visionary mediumship comes very easily to her, and she was doing this art course, and she was doing collage, and so she was at her apartment online for like 12 hours one day just doing art. And when she does art, she enters into a trance state very easily, that subjective state.
Mm.
And so she has this experience where she calls me up at around 10 p.m. and she's saying, I can't remember the last 2 hours. And what happened was that she had been kind of called to start just doing art on the floor in her living room, and she just felt like this
Like
energy was just twirling
directly
around
onto the
her.
floor?
Yeah, she was just like, like just manic, like just doing like five different collages on
Wow.
and and then she had lost time. She couldn't remember what happened for 2 hours after that. And so she was just definitely in a deep trance. So I figured, we were on the phone, she was calling me, and I figured, okay, maybe she's just uh really spaced out, right? So I grounded her. I walked her through a grounding meditation. She seemed okay after that, and then she said she's gonna go take a shower. So we say goodnight. She calls me back after her shower, and she says, "I can't remember the last half hour." And then when we're
Huh.
talking on the phone, it switches. It switches, and something comes through, and it's basically just going, and
Oh my
I,
God.
and so it's this odd thing where when that
You've only
happens,
been dating a month at that point? It's
and
like,
when that happens, you just kind of default, like, how do I deal with this situation, right? So you go to what you've seen in movies and stuff. It's like, okay, you don't have
what?
the right to be there. You need to leave. And I was going saying that for a little while, and then she finally switches back, and she just starts sobbing, like, because she has no control over this. It's freaking. She has no memory of all of this, but she just
Yeah.
knows that she's not in control. And so I say, okay, fine. Look, I give me a couple of hours. I'm gonna, hit the road at 6 a.m. Come to Ottawa. We're gonna take care of the situation. And so I create a package, my bag full of everything I think that can help, everything I've accumulated over, these years of spirituality, from talismans from kind of the Western Hermetic tradition to incense and the purifying incense and salt and all this. I throw it in the bag, and I'm off to Ottawa. I arrive, and so the first thing we start doing is cleansing her apartment, because she's living in a artist commune. And so it's an apartment building, about, I think it's like 8 stories, and there's there's that potentially that kind of troubled artist energy in the building, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I start by cleansing everything. And uh, something that I did, and I'll be honest here, it is completely for self-preservation, is I brought a camera with me. I brought a little handy cam, and I set up in the hallway. And I'm glad I did, because I wouldn't believe what, in retrospect, I wouldn't believe what had happened if I hadn't
Yes.
had access to that
Footage.
tape. My
Mm.
mind would have basically said, maybe I overreacted in the moment. Maybe I was misled based on excitement, and I didn't actually see what I thought I saw. And so I set up this handy cam, just kind of taping the hallway. And so I do the Lester banishing ritual, the pentagram, and all this stuff. And then I'm cleansing the apartment with incense, and I'm scattering salt. And while I'm doing this on the camera, unbeknownst to me at the time, but I saw it during playback, Lauva is following me, and she's starting to kind of look like this and dropping her head and kind of looking like she's drunk. And so she's following me around, but then when I finally am done cleansing the apartment, I can't find her. And so I'm like, where'd she go? So I finally find her, though. She's out there she's on the third floor. And so she's out there on the patio, and she's kind of like hunkered down, and squatting in the corner there. And then afterwards, she explained that when I was putting down salt, all she could feel within was this overwhelming urge to get somewhere where there wasn't salt, and so
Mm.
that's why she's on the patio. And that this is also why I advise people when they're cleansing, always with salt and with incense, always start at the windows and then work towards the front door. That way, there's no safety issues if you're if you're pushing something out.
I see.
So
Yeah, that, oh, God, wow, yeah.
I go and I kneel down next to her, and I just know it's not her. She has the look of like a scared animal. And I just kneel down. I say, "So who are you?" It's just this uncanny moment where it's like I never thought I'd be asking that question, but it wasn't her. And so I just try and talk to her. And at that moment, she kind of starts standing up and she puts her hand on the railing and starts stepping up on a chair, putting a foot on a chair, almost like she's like gonna jump. Right. So I'm like, nope. And I go and I grab her, big bear hug, and I just bring her inside. And that's when she starts squirming and like, fight, trying to
Because of the
flail
salt?
back.
Yeah.
And she's just kind of like, I got her in this big bear hug and she's just kind of moving against it. And I sit her down in a chair, and in that moment, I try to grab the handy cam to kind of get, to tape what the heck is happening right now. And at that moment, uh, she's not quite in my arms, and so she gets up and she starts going for the front door. And I'm thinking, oh God, this is the last thing I need for her to get into the hallway while possessed. And uh,
Right.
and I have
And
to drag
nobody
her
else in the
back in.
building
Yeah,
has
like
no, any idea what's going on,
the
right?
optics are not good if they see me dragging her back into the apartment. so
Yeah.
so thankfully I was able to catch up with her while it was fiddling with the lock on the
Yeah.
door. And so I track her back in. At that point, it is fighting quite a lot, and so I basically have to get her in a bear hug. I'm like have her in a grapple hold on the ground because that was the only way to. And so I'm holding her while I'm trying to keep her head from hitting the ground or anything like this. And then it was 20 minutes, 30 minutes of the most surreal time of my life because I'm just, you know, lying there and I'm like, hey, what do I do? What do I do?
Wow.
And at that moment, it was weird because at that time there was no, I wasn't worried. And that was the weird part, is that I just knew it was going to turn out okay. I just had to move through it. I just had to do what I
Mm.
could do and it was going to be okay. I knew it at this deep level. And so I'm just talking with this being and it doesn't say anything. I'm just getting that kind of thing. And so eventually I'm trying to reason with it. I'm trying to say, and eventually I say, and I'm calling on every single spiritual favor that I've ever had. I'm calling upon angels. I'm calling upon pagan deities who I've worked with during my Wicca days. I'm calling on everything to try and get rid of this thing, calling in every favor. And eventually, I say, "Look, I can understand why you want to be in this vessel. She's a very nice woman, and I can understand it. But you're not going to enjoy this because I'm going to hound you every day and not make it an enjoyable process for you to be here. You're not going to live an unencumbered life without me harassing you
Yeah.
over it."
Yeah.
And then it said that it basically was silent for a second. Then it said the only syllable that it actually said during this experience. It said fine. It just said fine. And then within
I love
15
that.
seconds,
Fine.
yeah, and then there was 15 seconds of silence, and then suddenly love was back. And her first question was, why am I on the floor? And so
She had
uh,
no memory of any of it.
it's
Where,
still, you go ahead,
yeah.
sorry.
Well, where was she during that time? Did she say?
She explained it as though she was a like a beam in a house, like a lumber beam in like the basement of a house, and the house was the body. And so she was just experiencing it as not in control, but just being there passively as a small part of it. And so
That's wild.
it was a
I
very
I've never
int-
heard anything like that before. Wow.
it's quite, well, the thing is, and ultimately this is why I talk about this in terms of shamanism and visionary mediumship is that, first off, don't want people to think that this is a very common experience. It is very, very uncommon. Okay. But something, here's the thing: initiation, when it comes to the spirits, is that they will only throw at you something that you can handle. And this means that they might throw something at you that if they asked you, you'd say, whoa, I'm not ready for that. Right.
Right.
But they know that
No.
you can handle it. And this is something that happens with initiation in the spirits. So Lauva had been working with shamanism for quite a while. And that morning, she had performed a visionary journey, a shamanic journey. And she had asked, okay, show me what's next. Give me what's next. And
Be
it's
careful
always
what you
it's
wish
always a
for.
very
Yeah.
dangerous thing to ask the spirits, because
Yeah.
they will sometimes give you exactly
They
what you need.
will. Yeah.
And they often will, and
And
almost
it's
always will.
not what you think is gonna, it's
A-
nothing. You cannot imagine what it's gonna be, right?
And the
Yeah.
way I put down what we experienced was that it was very much an initiation event. It was meant to scare the bejesus out of us.
Okay.
It was meant to, there's two ways that that could have gone. In that we could have experienced that and we could have been totally freaked out, and Lauva goes and joins a convent and burns all of her spiritual books, and I do the same and I go join a monastery. We could have just hidden from it,
Yeah.
but instead what it did was it confirmed the reality of these things to us. And then we doubled down, right? We
Hmm.
basically said, well, this stuff is real, and so I want to dig into this as far as possible to see what else is real. How can we work with this? What does the existence of the spiritual realms mean? How can it help people? So we just doubled down. We just went as deep as we could. And that really was the test, right? We're going to okay, you guys are interested in this kind of stuff, all right, we'll show you what's possible. And are you going to run away from it, or are you going to double down? And if you double down, well, fine, you're worthy of our investment, let's say.
Yeah.
Right. We're gonna, if you're just afraid of the stuff and don't want to, interact with it, well, it's not worth our time in helping you.
Yeah.
And so ultimately the kicker is that we learned after many a while later that the being who had been in Lauva was actually one of her guides, and that it was a pageant tree. They were trying to freak us out as much as they could, and that even that pageantry of standing up on the railing as though she's going to jump or something. It was all a controlled experience
Yeah.
to basically put us in terror during that time, and
Hmm.
to see, are you going to run away from
To
this,
test you. Yeah.
or are are you worth the medal? Are
Hmm.
you going to be able to work with this? And yeah, so it ultimately, now I want to let people know, initiation is not always that intense, but it
But
was
we can
it,
only hope that it would be. What
it is.
it wouldn't be fun if it wasn't, right?
And
I don't know.
unfortunately, I have to say, I would love to sit here and say, hey, I performed an exorcism, and I it's easy and all this kind of thing.
Oh,
And I can't take credit for that, though. Unfortunately, now I learned that it was a spirit guide, because it's like, okay, fine, I get it. It was a pageant. I suppose an actual exorcism is going to be a bit more difficult,
yeah.
but so it
Well,
was.
I mean, it sounds like it was a very impactful experience for both of you. Like, how come do you think your spirit guides like overlap with hers, or like how come you don't think about that in the sense that your spirit guides were arranging that to test you? Like it was for
Oh,
both of you.
yes, absolutely. I definitely feel it was a test for both of us.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that there's definitely some overlap in spirit guides there.
Yeah.
And definitely, I definitely feel and definitely know and believe that Lauva's higher self, let's say, is actively coordinating with my higher self, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that this is a contractual thing going down
Yeah. All the
through
way
many
before birth.
lifetimes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
through many
planned this.
lifetimes, and
Yeah.
I feel that her and I are definitely working, that the vessels that are that are being incarnated with those higher selves are definitely working together, or at least interacting over the ages, maybe
Yeah.
not always as a romantic partnership, but sometimes
Mm.
as, that teaching each other life lessons. I absolutely believe that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I believe it too. I do spiritual coaching with clients and I talk about that a lot because to me that's the most healing thing that you can fully realize is that you all of this is for a reason and you even planned it and you don't
Yes.
remember and that you've done it before probably and so when you start to realize this is not an accident and maybe all the crazy things in your life are a test that was actually a
Mhm.
gift to help you learn something, when you start to see it that way then you get into the gratitude mindset and then all the possibilities open. But if you live in fear, like, oh, I don't know, these dark spirits
Mhm.
are following me. I need to have an exorcist. I'm scared. Then you're living in like a lack mindset where you're just like manifesting more scary things in your life. That's what I think. So I try to help people understand that yeah, that it's all for a reason and the reason is good. It's not a malicious thing, but there are scary events in everybody's life.
Absolutely. And the central pivot there is that there is meaning, right? That there is a
Yeah.
meaning to everything, and that we are on this journey of healing and of developing ourselves, and that there's a purpose, right? If you don't believe that there's a purpose, don't believe that there's meaning, then yeah, anything that bad happens, it's just, this random occurrence, and you just have to learn to live with the pain of it, right?
Yeah.
And but if you realize, okay, look, this life is this teaching experience, and that we are, the point is to heal, the point is to um help, the point is to grow and connect with that highest potential that you are. It really brings a source of comfort,
Mhm.
because well, it's not all just a random
Yeah.
a random roll
Yeah.
of the die, right?
So
Yeah.
even when you're depressed and you're having a dark night of the soul or whatever you want to call it, you're struggling with your purpose. I think spiritual people tend to even have that even more intensely. It's like it's not all cupcakes and rainbows for us, right? But even in our dark times, well, at least for me, I still feel the purpose. I've never fully denied that all of this happens for a reason. Sometimes I'm upset about it. Like I'm upset that it was planned and I would almost rather it be random sometimes, but that's just my ego talking, right? Like my higher self, if I connect with that, I know, and with my spirit guides that um, there's comfort in the fact that there's order to everything. And that,
Mhm.
yeah, that,
It's it,
yeah,
it's a cyclical process that exists throughout our reality. We constantly are exposed to challenges and a chaos, a breaking down of our current order. And then the question is, okay, will you learn? Will you heal? Will you,
yeah.
and
What are you
each
going
time
to
that
do with it?
happens,
Hmm.
you level up,
You
you,
level up.
you come to a new level of understanding, of wisdom, of compassion. And
Hmm.
I mean, it's the whole wounded healer motif,
I
right?
love
That
that. Yeah.
that the healer needs to have suffered. It needs to
Hmm.
have gone through pain, whether it's overcoming the physical problems, or trauma, or all of this, because that creates the level of compassion that's needed by a healer. If you go through life and nothing ever has happened to you that's bad, if you've never suffered,
How can you help
it's
someone else?
more difficult
Hmm.
to be a healer, right? And
Hmm.
so it opens one up to that possibility
Yeah.
of a life script, right? Of a purpose as a healer. So it's
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that has to happen in your life to bring you to where you are.
Totally agree. And like, because there are people who will argue, how can you help someone else if you have not gotten to a good place yourself? But the problem is
Mm.
there's like so many layers like of healing. You cannot, you may never reach the what is perfection, like what is total healing, right? So yeah, I think that wounded healer is a really good archetype to keep in mind for anybody on this path, because you can help people right now. You don't have to be in a really healed place to already be helping someone else with your experience.
What do publics, what do teachers say? You stay one chapter ahead of the student, right? And I mean, as long as you as long as
So
you've
true.
healed as long as
Yeah.
you've healed something similar to what your client, your student is going through, you can help them on that, right?
Yeah.
Maybe and I think, unfortunately, a lot of spiritual teachers, spiritual coaches, they get put on this pedestal where it's like
Yes.
everything must be roses and perfect in your life, and that you've totally conquered the ego, and you never have bad days, and you never
Hmm.
want to cry, and you never want
You
to
never
punch a wall.
show that side of you on social media or to your clients. Like you want to show this perfect human, but I
Eh,
don't believe in
yeah.
that.
And unfortunately, it puts a lot
Mm-hmm.
of stress on spiritual teachers and spiritual coaches and everyone, because uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's a false narrative.
It's
It's never
false.
like that. Everyone is on the stage of healing. I don't think it ever ends. I don't think that
No,
there's always more levels to rise to, and there's always
it's infinite. Hmm.
more things to address. I mean, if you've taken care of your individual healing, let's say, well, then there's things like ancestral healing that you have to start working on.
Yes.
And then there's no
Something you
end.
didn't see until you got to that level of healing. You didn't realize you were wounded in that other way. Yeah, it's always opening up like a lotus flower. Like
There's a
constantly there's another petal underneath the other one.
there's a
Yeah.
Terence McKenna quote where it's when the fire of wisdom grows bigger and brighter, the circle of darkness around it grows bigger, right? If it's just a little fire, then the perimeter of that
Mm.
darkness around the fires is quite small.
Oh wow. Oh
But
yeah.
when the fire is this huge bonfire, and you have light going out 20, 30 feet, well, think about the perimeter of that darkness that you can see, the questions, then the things that you need to address. It's constantly growing. It's so
Hmm.
when
Yeah,
you're just
that's
getting
right.
started, the number of issues that you think that have to be addressed can be quite small,
Yes.
because you're not seeing it, right? But the
Yeah.
more that you've addressed, the more that the more things that you'll have to work on, right? It's a never-ending process.
It's never ending. Yeah.
And unfortunately,
So
we live in
I,
an infinite universe, right? So there's just no end to, to the experiences we're going to have
if
in
there
this
was,
world.
then I think I'd be bored. There's always another adventure, right? So
What
on
else are we
that,
going to do with eternity?
yeah. Yes, that's right. Well, I think that we're gonna wrap up episode 11 here, but on that note, talking about people who might want to be healers and get into this kind of work, and they're toying with the idea of things like what you teach, visionary mediumship. How can they get in touch with you? Tell us all your socials, your website, where you're located. How can people work with you?
Absolutely. If you are interested in connecting with your spirit guides in many different ways, trying out visionary mediumships, one of the easiest things that you can do to connect with your guides, come check out the Spirit World Center. And that is at the Spirit World, no, sorry, not it's just spiritworldcenter.com. And you can also find us on Instagram at spirit_world_center. Uh, and let's see, we also have a Facebook page. It's not very heavily populated, so our main places are on Instagram and the website. And also feel free to come join us at the Spirit World Center community forum that we have on Discord. You can find an invite link to that on any of our podcast episodes. Oh, we also have the Spirit World Center podcast, and Emily was on that recently. In fact, her interview is going to be posted, well, tomorrow when we're actually recording this,
Yay.
but March 5th. So yeah, we have many places to find us. Just look for Spirit World Center. And the only other hit that you might get that's similar is, I believe it's called the Spirits World Center, and it is a great big liquor store down in the States. So that we are not that. So
Are you
yes, come check us
serious?
out.
That is
Oh yes,
great.
that's the
Wait,
only
is
other
that
hit that you
near
get.
you? That's excellent.
No,
Okay,
no,
so,
it's
but people get
it's
you mixed up all the time. Like, yeah. Yeah. So if you need whiskey, don't come to Eric. That's not what he does. I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, I
I'll share
think
a glass
that
with you, but that's about it.
but yeah, I highly recommend our listeners to reach out to Eric and find his website and work with him because this is such important work that we should all be getting into, I think. And I think it is for everyone personally. Um, I'm just going to say I'm Emily Jennings. I am a spiritual coach and writer. I read tarot. I teach meditation. My website is wellnessoneness.com. And my Instagram is wellness_oneness. And uh, that is episode 11. Thank you so much, Eric. This has been really enlightening and wonderful. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
All right, until next time.